This meeting is being recorded.
Good afternoon and welcome to this ARPAS-UK CPD session on drone insurance. Today we have Daniel Dodd from Coverdrone here to talk to us about how this all works. Daniel is the Aviation Manager at Coverdrone, responsible for their day-to-day work, and is himself a business graduate, currently working towards his certificate in insurance. Daniel enjoys working with an emerging industry and building a rapport with clients and service providers, both over the phone and in person at numerous exhibitions all over Europe. So Daniel, I am going to hand over to you at this point and put myself on mute and stop my own video.
Okay, no problem. Thanks very much, Anna, and thanks for having me. I'll just share my screen now. Just bear with me 1 second. Hopefully you should now be able to see the Coverdrone presentation entitled "What do you need to know about insurance for using drones?" So as Anna said, my name is Daniel Dodd. I'm the Aviation Manager at Coverdrone. I'll give you a little bit of background about myself. So I've been with the company now for coming up to 11 years. I've been the Aviation Manager here for the past 4 of that, so dealing with the drone side of things specifically. Like it was mentioned, I'm a business graduate. I have actually got my CAI now, and the company itself. So Coverdrone, I'll give you a little bit of background on us as well. I'd like to make the point right at the start that this isn't a sales pitch for Coverdrone at all, but there will be certain things in the presentation that are Coverdrone specific, because that's information that I've got to hand and it's where my expertise lies. So just sort of qualify ourselves a little bit. We were the first provider in the market, sold our first policy 2007, it says on there, so 15 years ago. And like I said, we've been in it from the start. So we do everything that's available on the market. We do commercial, we do recreational, we do short term, and we do annual coverage, both in the UK, Europe, Australia, New Zealand, and Canada as well. So we know what we're talking about. It's what we do on a day-to-day basis, and hopefully I can sort of impart some of the knowledge that I've gathered over the years doing this to try and help you sort of figure your way around the insurance market and what's important to know. So we'll start first and foremost with the drone insurance requirements in the UK. So what exactly are the legal requirements? So for those of you that don't already know, EC 785/2004 is the regulation that is applicable in the UK, which sets out the insurance requirements. So for commercial operators, insurance is a legal requirement, as it says on there, and you're required to have 750,000 SDRs as a minimum, which works out at approximately £850,000 worth of public and aviation liability, is what it's specifically relating to. There's no current regulation that stipulates that recreational operators have to have insurance in place. Obviously, from a safety point of view and peace of mind point of view, we would recommend it, because the policies that are out there through being a member of a club or buying a policy from an insurer, the covers that you can get for the premium that are being charged, it really does make sense to make sure you've got a little bit of cover in place there. The sticking point on the legal requirements, or where people sometimes struggle, is the definition of a commercial recreational operator. So in CAP 722, it actually defines a recreational operator as any unmanned aircraft which has been used for sport or recreational purposes, as it says on there. So by definition, anything that falls outside of that recreational usage will be defined as commercial and be required to have commercial insurance in place. So the sort of grey areas on this might be the search and rescue or research and development, that type of thing. They're not specifically getting paid for doing this, but it certainly isn't for recreational or sport purposes, so it would be commercial. Obviously, your company or one-man band going out taking photographs or surveys for a payment is quite easy to distinguish as a commercial operator, but it's those ones that fall in between. So the best way is that definition there. So if you aren't using it for sport or recreational purposes, then it needs to be on a commercial policy to make sure you're legally compliant. This isn't an insurer specific thing. So this isn't Coverdrone or whoever else on the market saying you have to buy commercial because of this. This is a legal requirement that's set out, and we're just following those rules and advising accordingly. Right, so now we've covered the legal requirement. We'll look at the rules and regulations a little bit further with regards to the CAA. All policies that are on the market will be written on the basis that you are flying legally. So by this, we mean that you have to make a legal flight and be able to evidence that in the event of a claim. So to do this, you need to comply with all the CAA requirements that are set out. So whether that be the relevant training, qualifications, certification, and as we know, this will now be dependent on which category in which you're flying in. Things have maybe a little bit more complicated since January last year, since the changes came into play. So it's the operator's responsibility while flying the drone to ensure that they know these rules and regulations and they know which category they fall into, and that you know what permissions you should have. So in the event of a claim, you aren't worrying that you haven't done something right and haven't got the right qualifications. You know a claim's going to be paid. Our area of expertise is insurance. It certainly isn't the rules and regulations surrounding operations of the drones in the UK. That would be something for a UK RAE, so the recognised assessment entities who are authorised by the CAA. If you gave one of those a call, or I'm sure companies like ARPAS will be able to direct you to people that will be able to help you navigate which category you're flying in and what training you need to make sure you're legally compliant. And from an insurance perspective, make sure that any claims that you have, should they arise, are paid out, and that you're not buying insurance for no reason. If you're not flying legally, a policy isn't going to be covered. So we can look at the actual policy coverage that is available on the market now. As I said at the start, this isn't a Coverdrone pitch, but these categories here on the left-hand side, they're the way that we define them. So that's the terminology that Coverdrone uses. So public and products liability and aviation liability will be the same across the board. But equipment might be referred to as hull coverage with other providers. Increased cost of working may be, it could be business continuity or business interruption cover, and PI might be errors and omissions, or it might be breach of data protection, that type of thing. But these are the core coverages that are available on the market, whether their word is slightly different under a different policy. And so we'll go through each of those, what they are and what you need to look out for, really. So we'll start with the liability side of things. So public liability is cover for damage to third-party property or persons. So if you hit somebody whilst flying your drone or hit somebody's property, this is a section that will cover that. And this is a section that the CAA are concerned with to make sure you're legally compliant. It needs to have aviation liability, and it needs to meet those minimum requirements, which £1 million worth of public liability, which is available on the market from all providers, would meet those. You can get anything from $1 million up to 50 million, maybe even over and above that on the market. We find that most clients settle somewhere around the between 1 and 5 million option, but there are various different ones out there, depending on where you're flying. Like some airports might require you to have a much higher liability limit. And under that public liability section is where you might find the covers for invasion of privacy or cyber liability, so a breach of client's data. It may be under a separate cyber policy, or it might be listed under the liability section, but there's types of covers that you need to be looking out for to ensure that the liability policy is sort of all-encompassing and will cover any eventuality. Now we can move on to the equipment side of things. So as I said before, this might be referred to as hull coverage elsewhere, or in Europe we hear it called casco. But this is essentially cover for any of your equipment, so whether that be the drones, payloads, cameras, ground-based equipment, hired in, it can all be covered in one way or another on the majority of policies that are on the market. One thing to bear in mind is that you're likely to need some form of split in your equipment when you are approaching insurers for a quote. So whether that be a split between airborne and ground-based, or a split between the actual drone and the payload that's been attached to it, one way or another, most providers on the market will ask you to break it down into certain ways. So it would be good to have that available, so that when you're getting your quotes from the market, you're making sure you're getting them on a like-for-like basis. And the limits of exposure for the equipment can range. I mean, it's on there from £1 to £1 million, but realistically, small end commercial drones might be the Mini 2, so anything from sort of £500 upwards. And I'm sure there's policies out there that are covering more than £1 million worth of coverage. The important thing to bear in mind when you are looking at the equipment cover is where it's insured and on what basis it's being insured. So is it insured in flight, in transit, in storage? Is it just in flight? Are there sort of certain caveats in place for when it's in storage, how you need to keep that or handle it when transporting it? Look into the finer details and find out how you're expected to manage those things, and find out how it will be replaced. Some companies may do a cash settlement, some might do new for old on a replacement basis. Some may do an agreed value on the drone. Some might make deductions for wear and tear for the age of a drone. So just be aware of what it is that you're signing up for, and so you don't get surprised when it comes to making a claim that a deduction is made that you weren't aware of because it wasn't immediately obvious at the start of the quote process. That's the main thing to sort of bear in mind when looking at the equipment coverage. So they're the two main sort of coverages, the public liability and the equipment, and then the additional covers available, as I mentioned before. So increased cost of working, that might be referred to as business interruption or business continuity. It would include replacement equipment in the event of a loss. So what we mean by this is if you're on a contract and you crash the drone and you're unable to continue flying with it, you've still got a contract there that needs fulfilling. So this section would pay for you to go and hire another drone to continue working, fulfill that contract, and at the end of the day, keep your clients happy and hopefully pick up further contracts off the back of it. And so that's an additional cover that's available on most policies, along with reinstatement of data. So this might be cover the costs of trying to recover corrupt data from an SD card if it's been damaged in a crash, or maybe even in the worst case scenario, paying the cost of reshooting that data. I mean, that might not always be possible if it's for a one-off event like a wedding, but if it was for something more generic, like site mapping that can be done another day, the policy might pick up the cost of going to do that as a result of an incident. And then you've got professional indemnity on there, so covering you for professional negligence and breach of data protection. These are all, they might be included as standard on some policies. There might be additional extras that you pay extra for on certain policies. It's worth checking what is included and what you need to add on to make sure your policy is sort of all-encompassing. So now we know what the requirements are and what coverage is available, we can look at what actually affects the insurance arrangements, the cover provided and the price. So it won't be a surprise to hear that the level of liability and the value of the equipment, the higher those two items are set, the higher the premium is likely to be. That's pretty standard across most insurance categories. The more you're insuring, the greater the loss is likely to be for the underwriter, the higher the premium is going to be. But those additional covers that we just mentioned, like the PI and the increased cost of working, if they are additional that you can add on, they will have a cost to them. So it's worth bearing those in mind as well. But the things that are more sort of operator specific might be the prior claims or the claims history of the client or the company. So I don't really like comparing it to car insurance, but it's something that happens quite a lot when I'm speaking to clients. But it's similar to that in that if you've had a crash during your last year or a couple of crashes potentially and made claims on that, then it's likely to increase your premium going forward. So that's always worth bearing in mind. You need to make sure that you're declaring those to the underwriters or the insurers that you're approaching so that they can evaluate the risk fairly. And then adding additional territories and extended permissions, like beyond visual line of sight or drone swarms. Those are going to attract a higher premium. So I will talk about those in a little bit more detail on the next few slides. So we'll just move on from that now and look at what other sort of further considerations you need to make rather than just the cost of an insurance policy. Admittedly, most people, including myself, the first thing you look at is the price, and it is important. It's a massive factor when deciding on who to insure with and what policy to take. But there is more to it than just the price of a policy. It needs to be right for you, and there's many different things you can check to ensure this. So the policy excess being the first one, there are some policies out there that might have a £50 excess for equipment damage, up to, I've seen policies of 25% of the total claim value. When buying the policy, it doesn't seem like a massively important section of the cover. But in the event of a claim for, say, a £10,000 drone, you're looking at the difference between paying a £50 excess and paying a £2,500 excess. It almost makes the cost of the insurance originally redundant, because that £2,500 is a massive amount to pay out in the event of a claim. If you're happy with that and you're happy to take that risk on, that's fine. But just make sure you're aware of what risk you're taking on and what claim excess you're signing up to at the start. And same with territorial limits. Some policies will be written on the basis that they are covering UK only, and that might be fine for you if you're only flying in the UK and don't plan on going overseas. But if you are flying overseas, if you're flying regularly in Europe or further afield, then you need to ensure that your policy reacts to that. And there are policies out there that are European-wide or worldwide. You need to find the one that's right for you, rather than buying the cheapest policy that might be UK only and then finding that you need to pay extra every time you go to Europe, which is every month. It's not going to work out to be cost effective. It's worth doing that due diligence at the start and finding out exactly what your policy is covering, so you don't get hit with some bills for extending that cover further down the line. It's the same with the policy parameters. So are you restricted on the number of pilots or number of flying hours, number of drones? Are any high-risk premises excluded? It's not always a problem if they are. If you've only got one pilot, one drone, and you fly very infrequently, then there being restrictions on these things won't be a problem for you. And you may well find that you get a lower premium because of it. But if you need to have multiple pilots on there and you're flying regularly with lots of drones, you need to make sure that the policy is compatible with that and will ensure that correctly for you. And if you are flying at high-risk locations, airports, railway lines, nuclear sites, you need to ensure that your policy is geared up to cover those, and you're not going to get charged extra to fly at those locations. So there is more to consider than just the overall cost of the insurance. You need to make sure that it's fit for purpose. There's no point buying a policy at a low premium or even a high premium that doesn't cover you correctly and doesn't meet your needs. It's worth doing all the research right at the start and making sure you're getting the right cover for what your company needs. So we'll have a quick look at what our highest causes of claims are, which might surprise you. It might not, depend on how good a pilot you are, but pilot error is the main one. It far exceeds any other claims that we get. It's not always something that pilots want to admit to, but it is covered on the policies. So human error happens, and that's what they're there to cover. But that is the main cause, followed by sort of accidental damage or mechanical failure. So if the drone just fails in midair and leads to a crash, that will be covered on the policies. And then things like loss of data connection, which links quite closely with flyaways, in the fact that a flyaway usually is due to a loss of data connection or some kind of malfunction. They are less and less common, I would say, than they were many years ago, but that's probably because of the technology improving. And then finally, something that we are seeing more of now is theft of property. I mean, by design, these drones now are compact and mobile, which is great, which makes them easier to use, but it also makes them more theft attractive and easy to steal. So it is something that we are seeing more and more of. And now we can move on to sort of future insurance requests, where we see the insurance market changing over the next few months, years. The main one being beyond visual line of sight permissions. As a company, we're seeing more and more of this in Europe, and we're writing policies for BVLOS flying on a daily basis outside of the UK. It's not quite as common in the UK. The sort of licenses and permissions that are being granted in the UK are a lot tighter. But I see as they become more relaxed and there's more permissions granted because we can prove that it's safe, it's going to lead to more things like drone delivery services and search and rescue operations beyond visual line of sight. And with that comes a different risk for the underwriters. Like I said, we are doing it and we're trying to build it into our rating at the moment, but it is a different risk, and the the more claims history we can get on this and the more experience of writing it, the more accurately we can forecast the premiums for that type of thing. It's the same with an increase in autonomous flights. We are getting more requests for this at the moment, which brings about sort of an interesting debate, really, because on the previous slide, I mentioned that the highest cause of our claims is pilot error, so human error. Bringing in autonomous flights, you could argue, would get rid of that human error. So it's a difficult one for the underwriters to really judge at the moment, because if it can be proven that these new or autonomous flights are error-free, I suppose is the right word for it. If they can be proved that they cause less incidents than pilot error, then there's an argument there for lower premiums for people that are flying that way. But the only way we're going to find that out is through claims experience. The more people that are doing it, and the more sort of commonplace it becomes, the more we can get claims experience and experience underwriting this side of things. So it's going to be as good as the technology can be. So if the technology can make it almost faultless and lead to less and less incidents, then that should lead to lower premiums or lower excesses or better insurance terms for operators. But like I said, it's in the future. It's sort of sticking my finger in the air at the moment. It's the unknown, but it's something that we are geared up for and we're prepared to underwrite. Same as drone swarms and drone shows. We're seeing more and more of these, again, more so in Europe. But with these becomes more of a risk as well. So people may have seen things like the Olympic Games. They had the light shows instead of the fireworks. Same at the New Year's Eve fireworks at Tower Bridge. They look great, but with them comes a different risk. There could be 100, 200, 300, 500 drones in the air at one time. As long as that technology works, then that's fine. But if there was a major malfunction, that's a lot of drones coming down over a lot of people all at once. So it's something that we need to get more experience at, and I suppose it's a case of trusting their technology to make sure it works. And then at the stage we know it does, and we know that we've got some solid claims history on it, it becomes something that is easier to underwrite. But it gives us sort of three areas there where we feel that the insurance may change going forward, and also the way that drones are operated may change going forward. And with that brings me pretty much to the end. So if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer those now.
That's great. Thank you very much for a fascinating talk there, Daniel. So,
no problem. I'll just stop sharing my screen now. Bear with me. There we go.
There we go. No problem. So here in the questions, we have one here that says, you said you're looking at excess in the future. Does the specialist insurance industry provide no claims bonuses, especially useful given the incentive to protect some potentially expensive equipment, sensors, drones, etc.?
Well, at the moment, there isn't a no claims from a Coverdrone perspective. We don't offer a no claims bonus. What we do is we evaluate the whole book on a regular basis. So that could be sort of annually. And if it merits a reduction in premium, then we will do that across the board for all of our clients that are, I wouldn't say claim free, but fall within our claim parameters. And I know that's easy to say, but year on year, if there's clients out there that have been with us for 5-6 years, they will have seen a dramatic reduction in their premiums over those years. We've actually just launched a rating reduction yesterday, which has brought our premiums down considerably across the board for all our renewal clients and for new business clients coming on. So the answer is no, we don't offer a no claims bonus. We review our premiums regularly and try and bring it down for all of our clients as regularly as possible.
Great. Can insurance be bundled with other business insurance?
So again, this is speaking from a Coverdrone perspective. We can cover on our policy ground photography and videography as well. So the public liability will cover you for the aerial work and your ground work, and the equipment can be insured in the air and on the ground whilst on photography and videography shoots.
That's great. Does that include transport to and from site?
Yes. So from a Coverdrone perspective, the equipment's insured on an all risk basis. So whether that's in storage, in transit, in flight, in use, it will be covered.
Great, great. How do you define sport in the case of recreational flying? Would this need to be an organised event or simply flying of an FPV drone with an observer through a gate?
Well, we don't define sport. The CAA would be the people that would define that. It's an interesting one. If you're flying for recreational, if you're going out and just flying your FPV with no commercial intention, no footage is being used on company social medias or YouTube channels to try and drum up any business, and it was purely for fun or for a race, then we would be happy to cover that under recreational policy.
Okay, that's great. That's really good to know. How does the split between airborne, ground-based / platform versus sensors work? What splits would you recommend?
So when we are asking clients for their splits, we do it on airborne equipment. So that's anything that will go in the air. So that would include the batteries, the drone, and any payloads that you attach. And then we'll do just ground-based equipment. So that will be the ground controller, any laptops, iPads, that type of thing. And the reason we split it is because the ground-based equipment has a lower rating on it because it's not as high risk. It's not going in the air.
Indeed, that makes sense, doesn't it? Okay. Any more questions for Daniel or about insurance within the drone industry? The interesting thing was, I was mentioning to Daniel earlier on, we had our annual conference yesterday, and we had Simon Batchelor from the National Police Chief Council's counter-drone team, who mentioned that occasionally when they've spoken to drone operators who are out flying, just having a general good conversation, and it turns out the person is flying commercially, they haven't realised that they need the insurance. It's just something that hasn't crossed their mind. So absolutely, if you're talking to friends and family, or you know that people are flying commercially, it's definitely worth mentioning that people do need insurance and reminding them.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Like we were saying before, it's surprising the number of people you speak to who just genuinely don't know they're supposed to have it. It isn't a case of trying to avoid it or get around it. And it's more about educating people. I mean, the people that are listening now are obviously wanting to find out about it, but you can go and buy a drone from Amazon or Argos, and it doesn't come with instructions telling you you've got to have insurance in place. So it's about getting that message.
Exactly. So we've got a question here from Matthew. When discussing with business insurers, they have a lot of issues with the nature of a business operating drones and the fact that it is or may be classed as aviation consultancy. This makes it challenging to discuss business insurance for a business and keeping the policies separate to the point where it is almost impossible to get standard business cover for the ground-based portion of the business. Do you have any recommendations on how to do this?
I feel your pain is what I'm about to say. We get this quite a lot. Clients coming to us who their current insurers find out that they're doing anything to do with drones and then say, right, it's aviation, we don't want to deal with it. The way that we get around it is you're allowed to have 2 public liability policies in place. As long as they specifically and clearly mention what they're covering, like ours is an aviation specific policy and will cover you as owners and operators of an SUA. We aren't trying to cover the other side of your business, and your current insurer should be able to do the same thing. They can have an aviation exclusion in their policy. However, Coverdrone was born out of a family-run broker. So is it Matthew? Sorry, I can't see the name of the business.
Yes.
If he wants to contact me, we can see if we can look at the rest of the insurance side of things for him as well and see if there's anything that we can help out on that side. But I know it is a problem with sort of generic insurers out there. They see drones and they run a mile. Yes,
we've had the same issue as well, and we don't operate them at all. Obviously, we help promote everyone else and support the drone companies. But occasionally, anyone hears drone and thinks,
Yeah, but if Matthew wants to reach out to me, then yeah, I'm more than happy to have a look at that or pass it on to the right person.
Absolutely. With regard to theft, is there anything you can think as an insurer you may be able to do or recommend to people to help alleviate some of the insurance risk of theft, i.e. watermarking, serial blocking, etc.?
No, it's something that we are sort of in discussions with the underwriters with at the moment. From an insurance perspective, we cover it as long as you take in sort of due care and attention, and by that we mean it's left in a locked vehicle and it's being treated as you'd expect. Basically, you haven't just left it out on the side and someone's come along and stolen it. But no, it's a problem we are trying to find with the fact that the manufacturers make these things portable, and which is great, and they make them as easy as possible for people to use and to transport. It also comes with it the fact that it makes it easier to steal and get away with it. So the drone registration possibly could help with this. The CAA drone, because you have to register the serial numbers of the drones on there, would stop potentially with people trying to sell them on second hand if they go to register it and see that it's been stolen. But yeah, that's something that we're working on at the moment to see if there's anything that can help with that.
So Daniel, I am just popping up emails if people want to get in touch with us at all. But I think that may be, unless there are any more questions come through, I'll give you a moment and we'll just talk. But that's really helpful answering all of those questions for us, and also the presentation. It's exciting to hear. Really helpful.
Yeah, no problem at all. Like I said, yeah, my email's on there. So if you have any further ones, either via ARPAS or straight to myself, I'm happy to help out. That's
lovely. So just for the audible side of things, I can be contacted via membership@arpas.uk, ARPAS, and Daniel is on daniel@coverdrone.com. Thank you very much indeed, Daniel, for a fascinating talk. Thank you, attendees, for coming along and giving us your time to listen and find out more. The sessions will all be posted to the ARPAS website in due course so that you can listen again, or you can share them with friends and family or other businesses that you work with, so that they are aware of what happens and what we do too. Thank you very much then, everyone. I will close the seminar now. Thanks very much. Goodbye.
Thank you.